Rogue is right now one of the most popular characters in Diablo 4. But the thing is that everyone is using the very same build, and yes, it is a very powerful build, and we're speaking about Twisting Blades. But what about the Rangers and how powerful are they? We also have very popular penetrating shot builds, but no one is really using Rapid Fire. And as a matter of fact, I found out that Rapid Fire is one of the most overpowered little things that you can build with a rogue. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about a rapid fire build that is going to make you a monster, that is going to turn you into an invincible turret that can laser beam the health bar of elites and also deal just the right amount of AoE damage. Now that is the basic core, the basic thing. Everyone is using Twisting Blades because of the AoE damage potential, but when it comes to single target fights, it struggles a little bit. Now this guy is going to be quite the opposite. It's never going to be as good as an AoE build, but it's just going to be more than enough damage for AoE for you to be able to clear dungeons real fast, but it's also going to focus on deal laser damage to bosses. So the amount of damage that you deal to bosses with this build, it's just the highest that you can get with the rogue. Not Twisting Blades nor anything else. It's going to deal the amount of damage of laser beam damage that this guy does to elites and bosses. So let's talk about that. First and foremost, the abilities that we're going to be using. The thing is that what I love about this build is that you're going to be using mainly 95% of the time you're going to be using rapid fire, and you're never going to run out of your essence. Now 90% of the time you're going to mostly be using your rapid fire skill, and you're never going to run out of energy provided that you actually have your rotations properly and you're doing your rotations properly in that thing. So the basic skill that we're going to be using, Forceful Arrow. We're never going to be using this thing as a main means of damage. Mainly we're going to be using this thing when you mess up your rotation and you need something else to cause vulnerable damage to enemies. And this thing is going to do so, because when we hit vulnerable damage to enemies with our rapid fire, it's going to give us energy back per cast of rapid fire. So the thing is that what you want to do is just take this path as soon as you start the game, and then what you're going to take is, as soon as you can, max out rapid fire. You can take possibly 3 ranks, because after that you get diminishing returns, but at the end of the day we're going to be using 95% of the time this skill, so you want to max it out as soon as possible. And then you also want to have rapid fire, improve rapid fire with vulnerable gain energy as soon as possible. Then from here we're not going to be taking that much other than the passive weapon mastery, which is going to give us 12% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. From here, passives that we're going to be taking, close damage reduction. Yes, this is a ranger build, but you're going to be close to enemies. And then you have Siphoning Strikes, which heal you basically every time that you deal critical damage. And then from here, this is one of the most important things, this is going to be the bread and butter of your rotations right here. We're not going to be taking anything from here because we're not going to be mobile. We're always going to be standing in one single place with this build, and it's just going to be gorgeous and powerful, and yes. So concealment, we're going to be taking 1 rank of concealments, but it is very important that you take Subverting Stealth, which is going to... The next skill that you use with this, once you enter into concealment, it's going to make enemies vulnerable for 6 seconds. 6 seconds, it's actually quite a lot of damage. And the next skill that you're going to be using with this thing, it's most of the time it's going to be Poison Trap. Poison Trap, it's going to cause AoE damage into the enemies, and it doesn't matter if they delay their entrance, it doesn't necessarily need to be when they trigger the thing. Every time that anyone enters your poison damage, your poison area, which is going to be a killing zone, it's going to be a kill zone. Every time that enemies enter right there after you throw your concealments, they are going to be vulnerable. And since they are going to be vulnerable, you're going to be doing raining of arrows with your rapid fire, which is never going to run out of energy because of that thing. And also, well, in here we just going to have extra percent chance to reset your imbuements, and we're actually going to be using imbuements. And then Dark Shroud. This is something that you can have up to your personal preference. This is something, a kind of defensive skill, and we're not going to be moving that much. You could also be taking this one, or you can also be taking a ultimate, which I do not believe to be ultimately that effective with this build. But by all means, you can take Shadow Clone or Rain of Arrows and whatnot. You can most definitely take one of this. This is not going to be a mandatory thing. What is going to be a mandatory thing is going to be Shadow Imbuements, and we're going to be taking the blended Shadow Imbuements, which is going to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds after the first explosion. We're not taking the Poison Imbuements or the Cold Imbuements, mainly because this doesn't deal vulnerable damage. This doesn't cause enemies to be vulnerable. As you can see right now, by the time that we reach this point, you have already you're already aware that we have infinite energy because we build a character based on making enemies vulnerable to never run out of that energy. Cold Imbuement actually has the chance to make vulnerable on enemies, but it's just the chance, dude. Whereas Shadow Imbuements, it's going to guarantee for you to make vulnerable enemies so long as you kill them with those first explosion. And then the rest of your stats, well, finally we're going to have Victimize, which is going to cost that much DPS on vulnerable things. Your Paragon is just going to be focused as well on vulnerable stuff, as you were able to guess by now. The passive skills that we haven't mentioned just yet, it's going to be this one. This is a must. This is a synergy between this thing. When you enter Concealment, what it's going to do is going to allow you to reposition. Sometimes the real bad thing about this build is that it is not very mobile, and you have to be taking quite a lot of defensive stuff to actually make it viable. But even then, sometimes you will fight enemies or elites or bosses that have very, very annoying skills like explosions or CCs and whatnot, so you want to kill them as soon as you can. Concealment is going to heal you with this thing for your 100% of your life, so long as you let it just go through, right? Just finish the skill. While you're doing so, you're repositioning in the battlefield and you're trying to kill the enemy that's causing you issues. And then we're going to have Malice, which is going to deal that much more damage, more DPS to vulnerable enemies. And then we have this right here, which every 100 energy you spend grants you 15% increased lucky hit chance for 5 seconds. And as you guessed, we're always abusing our energy, and we're always gaining energy back. So this thing is mainly 100% of the times active. We want to have that one as well. The Poison Trap or Death Trap activates gain 20% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable and crowd control enemies, and do remember that that's one of your rotations. Enemies on your Poison Trap are always going to be vulnerable because of subverting stealth. And that is basically everything that you need to know about the build. Now, the legendary aspects. There are very specific legendary aspects that you need to have in your build, mainly for survivability purpose and for DPS purpose as well. The most important one that you're going to have is going to be Aspect of the Protector. Every time that you deal damage to a elite, it's going to give you a barrier that is going to just shield you from damage. And then we have the Aspect of Disobedience. You gain 25% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 25%. So every time that we are dealing damage, we always are dealing damage. Poison Trap contributes to this quite a lot. And it doesn't mean the amount of damage. It's just, it means that every time that there's something, a form of damage triggering, this thing is going to go higher. So what you want to do is want the poison trap active as much as possible, because that is going to affect many enemies and it's going to build the effect that much faster for you. And then we are going to have Enshrouding Aspect. This is something also that I like to use. This is not a mandatory as the rest of the ones, but if you want to, this is going to gain you a free Dark Shroud every 3 seconds that you stand still. And what do you know? You're always going to be standing still because you're always going to be doing this stuff. This is what you're going to be doing, and this is just, you're just going to be a mindless turret. And then we're going to have the offensive ones. For the offensive ones, we're going to have this one right here. If you decided to take the Dark Shroud 1 and you decided to take the Dark Shroud skill, this is just going to cause Dark Shrouds to explode and to deal damage. And then this is something that you're always going to have, always. Deal 5% increased damage for each second you stand still. Remember, we're always standing still, we're never moving from our place, other than looking for that specific elite enemy that is causing annoyance to us. And then we're going to have the aspect of the arrow storms, which is going to cause arrow storms whenever you use marksman skills. And what do you know, 100% of the time, if not 95% of the time, you're using marksman skills with your rapid fire, so we're always going to be triggering this thing. Now, the resources that we want to be using, I think that this is actually a must. Killing vulnerable enemies grants you 50% increased energy regeneration for 4 seconds. So the more energy that we can get from all sources, it doesn't matter that we already have enough resource energy management. The more that you can have, the better. That is always going to be the better. This is always going to be a must as well. This goes into your boots, mostly in most of the cases. But becoming injured while crowd control grants you unstoppable for 4 seconds. This effect has a 40 seconds cooldown, and that is one of the most important aspects about this build. Since we are not mobile, sometimes if we are not fast enough, the thing is that you're going to be looking for those enemies that cause you CCs, that cause you to be frozen, that cause you to be stumbled, and kill them before they can do so. But if you cannot kill them, that is going to be your ward against that. Very important to have in mind is that, as you can see, my weapons, I never level up my weapons, I just have my basic stuff. This is where you're going to be placing your offensive skills. So for example, my marksman arrow storm, the arrow storm thing, I have it right here. It's always active, it doesn't matter that I level up, because as you can see, this is a level 36 dagger that I have never changed. Just make sure that this thing has some base stats that actually are in your favor to have. So for example, this one has 37 dexterity, as you can see right here. I'm never going to change this unless I have something, I find something that has more dexterity. And then we have this one, which gives me 36 dexterity and 15 to all stats. And this one has the inner calm, the deal percentage of damage whenever you're standing still. And that is basically where you're going to be placing those aspects. Now let's talk about the rotations. For the rotations, what you want to do is use your concealments, and once you use your concealments, you're going to use your potion trap. Whenever enemies enter that potion trap, they are going to be vulnerable. And guess what? They're going to be exploding, so they're going to be spreading that vulnerable. And since they're going to be spreading that vulnerable, 100% of the time you're going to be dealing damage to enemies that are vulnerable, and 100% of the time you're going to be gaining your energy back, and it's going to be just a explosion around you. Again, it's not going to be as amazing as a twisting blades, but it's just more than enough for you to clear rooms real fast without having to waste your energy. I also forgot to mention that we're going to be using the inner side specialization. We're never going to be using basic skills. Never. We're never going to be using ultimates. And this thing, it's just going to give us more energy to be spamming more rapid fires, which is that much more amazing. And then another part of the rotation is, if you mess up that rotation, you're going to be using your shadow imbuements to cause that much more vulnerable damage to gain that energy back. And if all that fails, you can use your forceful arrow to keep gaining that energy back. But then again, everything is going to be vulnerable around you. The main goal for this rotation is to have everything vulnerable around you for you to gain as much energy as possible. And when it comes to bosses, this guy is just going to laser bosses like you have no idea. Let me leave you right here, right now, with one boss fight. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Have a beautiful night, goodbye, subscribe to the channel, and if no one told you that you're just a beautiful person, you're indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. Have a beautiful day, goodbye.
Wilds cannot be tamed. You're all fools to try.
You